African folklore, a treasure trove of untapped horror. Well, buckle up because African Tales from the Crypt is about to unleash 6 spine-chilling stories that might just redefine the genre as we know it.
Oh wow, that sounds intriguing. What makes these stories stand out from the typical horror fare we're used to?
Well, it's all about the cultural context. These tales are deeply rooted in African traditions and beliefs, which adds a whole new layer of complexity and terror. Take the first story they mentioned, the vengeful ancestors. It's not just about ghosts or monsters, but about the very real belief in many African cultures that our ancestors can directly influence our lives, for better or worse.
That's fascinating. So it's tapping into existing cultural fears and beliefs?
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful. In many African traditions, ancestors are seen as active participants in the lives of the living. They can offer guidance and protection, but as this story suggests, they can also bring retribution if they're disrespected or forgotten. It's a terrifying concept because it's not just about personal harm, but about the consequences for your entire lineage.
That's a chilling thought. It reminds me that horror isn't just about jump scares or gore, but about tapping into deep-seated cultural anxieties.
You're absolutely right. And that's why I think this series has the potential to be both terrifying and enlightening. It's not just offering new scares, it's providing a window into different cultural perspectives and beliefs. I'm particularly intrigued by how they describe these as forgotten horrors. It suggests there's a wealth of terrifying tales that have been overlooked or lost over time.
So, uh, do you think we might see some unique supernatural entities in these stories?
Oh, definitely. We're likely to encounter creatures and spirits drawn from African folklore rather than the usual vampires and werewolves. For example, we might see things like the Tokoloshe from Zulu mythology, a small mischievous creature that's said to cause trouble and even harm people, or the Popo Bawa from Zanzibar, a shape-shifting demon with, well, let's just say it has some pretty terrifying abilities.
Wow, those sound genuinely frightening. It's interesting how these creatures often embody specific fears or taboos within their cultures.
Exactly. And it's not just about the monsters. The second story they teased, The Forest of No Return, taps into a different kind of fear. Many African cultures have a deep, complex relationship with nature and the spiritual world. So this cursed wilderness isn't just a spooky setting. It's likely tied to specific beliefs about the power and danger of certain natural spaces.
That's a great point. And the fact that it's two boys who dare to enter this forest adds another layer of tension, doesn't it?
Absolutely. There's something universally relatable about the foolishness of youth, that feeling of invincibility that makes you think you can challenge the unknown. It makes me wonder about the warnings they're defying. Are these just local superstitions, or is there a deeper history to this forest? Maybe some past tragedy or dark ritual that cursed the land.
Those are all intriguing possibilities. I'm curious about how these stories might reflect different cultural values or fears compared to Western horror.
Well, that's a great question. Western horror often plays on fears of the unknown or the loss of individual identity. But in many African cultures, there's a strong emphasis on community and family bonds. So these stories might explore the terror of being cut off from your community or failing in your familial duties. The fear isn't just about personal harm, but about the consequences for your entire social network.
That's fascinating. It really highlights how horror can be culturally specific.
Exactly. And that's why I'm so excited about this series. It's not just about scares, it's a cultural exchange but with added nightmares. I'm particularly interested in how they might adapt traditional storytelling techniques for this modern format. Many African cultures have rich oral traditions that could translate beautifully to audio.
Oh, like what? Can you give an example?
Sure, we might see more emphasis on the rhythm and cadence of the language, or perhaps the use of call and response patterns that are common in some African storytelling traditions. And imagine if they incorporated some traditional music or sounds to enhance the atmosphere. It could really help transport the listener into these eerie African landscapes.
That would be amazing. I'm really curious about how they'll use sound design to bring these environments to life.
Oh, me too. Take the cursed forest, for example. What does that sound like? They could use a mix of natural sounds, rustling leaves, animal calls, but distort them slightly to create an unsettling atmosphere. Maybe incorporate some low, ominous tones to really get under the listener's skin. And imagine if they used silence strategically too. Sometimes what you don't hear can be just as frightening as what you do.
You're right. It's all about building tension and keeping the listener on edge. And with 6 stories in the series, they have plenty of opportunities to experiment with different techniques.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the potential for interconnected storytelling. The way they've framed it as African Tales from the Crypt suggests a certain continuity or shared universe. I wonder if we'll see any connections between the different stories. Maybe certain supernatural entities or cursed objects will appear in multiple tales. Or perhaps we'll see the consequences of one story's events playing out in another.
That's an intriguing idea. It could be a great way to showcase the diversity of African cultures, while also highlighting shared themes and beliefs.
Exactly. And it could create a rich, interconnected mythology that spans different African cultures and regions. It's exciting to think about the world-building possibilities. You know, there's something universally human about gathering around to share spooky stories. It's been happening around campfires for thousands of years, and now we're doing it through podcasts and other media.
Well said. I think this series has the potential to be both terrifying and enlightening. It's not often you get to be scared and culturally enriched at the same time.
You're so right. I don't know about you, but I'm both excited and a little nervous to dive into these stories. Something tells me we're in for some sleepless nights ahead. But you know what? I think it'll be worth it. There's nothing quite like the thrill of a good scary story, especially one that challenges your perspectives and introduces you to new ideas.
I couldn't agree more. Well, it looks like we're eagerly anticipating African Tales from the Crypt.
We certainly are. And on that chilling note, we'll wrap up this episode of Genfm. Remember to listen closely, and maybe keep the lights on just in case. Until next time, sweet dreams, if you can have them.